I've been telling y'all about Snack for a long time. Victor Conte them. All right, so like, all right, hear me out. No bullshit for real. They make the drug at the limit of non-responsible, right? So like this right here. This level is you're banned. That's a banned substance. They will make the drug all the way up to the line of the banned substance, but it just doesn't show, so it's not responsible. So they've been doing that shit for years, but now that they, tapped into it, it's getting caught. Y'all think Canelo hasn't been taking Clinton Bruderol for a long ass time? Y'all think he ain't back on that shit? Or y'all think it was just in the state? Because I go to Mexico all the time from Houston, from Texas. I'm in Mexico all the time, in the state. I ain't never got popped for no shit like that. Think about it. They microdosing it. They're taking, look, no excuse. I'm not trying to put nobody out there. This is not just boxing. There's a lot of athletes all over the world. They make the drug right there to the line of like disqualification, but they don't surpass it. So they're not getting caught for it. A lot of these fighters are all kind of shit.
Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where maybe we get our twins back. If we can get Jamel and Jamal Charlo back fighting, I think that'll be a strong 2025. Probably not much boxing to watch this weekend and probably not much to talk about in the last week, but we'll make it work, I guarantee it, okay? But the two fights I did see this weekend were obviously Jamal Charlo versus Thomas Lamana, and then Caleb Plant versus Resendez. And the reason we all watched those fights was simple, right? The winners were going to face each other. The expectation was we were going to get Plant versus Charlo, which would bring to an end the saga that started with Caleb Plant slapping Jamal Charlo and sort of what we've seen since then. Now, I had my views on this kind of build-up because, one, I don't think Charlo is really fight fit. And I felt before the fight, Charlo would rely on just being strong and having otherworldly power in his right hand, right? Which is what he relied on in the lower weight classes. And I also feel he hasn't got used to being a super middleweight. So I think there's a big argument for him to get used to being hit as a super middleweight before he starts looking for big fights. But boxing's a business ultimately. And with Caleb Plant, strange career, isn't it? And it's a bit like him and Charlo are very similar in that if you take Plant's defeats off, right, to Canelo and Benavidez, and you look at the rest of his record, it's solid, but not spectacular. Like Jamal Charlo, really good record. When you've got names on your record like Charlo has, who's he got? Matty Korobov, Derevyanchenko, fought J-Rock as well, and Austin Trout. These are good names to have on your record, right? And that's in lower weight classes as well. And Caleb Plant's similar. I mean, he's been in the ring with good guys. I think he was wasn't he in with one of the Durrells and that sort of crowd. Solid, just a solid record. Guys like Porky Medina, etc. on Plant's record, solid gatekeepers. But neither guy had stepped up to that rarefied air and shown us that they belong at that level yet. And that's why we were looking forward to this fight, to see of the nearly men. That's what they are really, aren't they? They're nearly men. Of those two nearly men, who's the most nearly man of them all? And it doesn't feel like we're going to get that because Plant lost to Resendez and Charlo handled Lamana with relative ease. Now, here's the thing with Caleb Plant. I always felt he was a confidence guy. Because you looked at how he handled business, the celebrations he'd have, digging someone's grave celebration and this and that. That's him. You watch how he dresses. Big personality. I'm the biggest dog in the yard. I back down from nobody. But you're now 3 defeats in. And at some point, that goes away. And you're like, I'm not as good as Canelo. Can kind of live with that. Generational talent. Now you're going to tell me I'm not as good as Benavidez Jr.? Well, not Benavidez Jr. Is he a junior? David Benavidez, we'll call him. I'm not as good as him. That's slightly worrying. Now I'm not as good as Resendez. And so if you're Caleb Plant at this point, like, how good am I? Was James DeGale right to ignore me because maybe I'm not who I think I am? But the only way you find that out in boxing is if you step up and you say, right, I'm going to take these guys on. And he deserves so much credit for saying, I'm going to take these guys on. I may get put on the floor. I may get embarrassed, but I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to make good money from doing it. And he has done. And I contrast that with Charlo, because the feeling around Charlo is he never did that. He had chances to do that. There were times where people say, why don't you go and fight Golovkin? And on reflection, maybe he should have done, because when you hit as hard as Jamal Charlo does, I don't think you're ever out of a fight. But acclimatization to weight classes, Golovkin's probably a super middleweight fighting as a middle, and he was generational too for many reasons. Not an all-time great, but he was generational. So you've got two guys, I would think, that sit at that same level, like world level, but not elite. One's taken the risks, Plant's taken the risks, Charlo hasn't. And so the boxing fans always lean towards Caleb Plant. But we see with Charlo's life that he's just probably had a lot to go through outside the ring. And I'm not saying that it's not of his own making, but you still got to go through problems, whether you create them or not. And that's what we have. We lost really good years of the Charlo brothers, and no one can explain why. Those two guys would have been the perfect double act to bring American boxing back when it needed to come back. Different weight classes. Funny that Jamal went to 168 before Jamal did. But different weight classes, yet bring the same energy. And it was an energy that the American fans could have done with at a time where people like Wilder have disappeared. There was nothing there, and they were there, and who knows what happened. But you have these two headlining a card that in the era of Turkey and Saudi Arabia isn't all that anymore. It's just not all that. And we'll come on to the role of promoters going forward later on in this one. But watching Plant box, and they say that he injured his right hand, and that might be true, but he didn't look like he used to look. And this is where I come back and say, be very careful when you change trainers. Because everyone thinks about what they gain when they change trainers. They go, right, I'm going to go and train with him. He's going to give me this. And no one ever goes, what's he going to take away from you? Now, I don't know what Stephen Breadman Edwards has given Plant. I don't even know if he trained him for this fight. But I saw the results of their training in the previous fight. And if Plant went backwards, Plant, for me, is a guy who was always going to be unorthodox. Athletic enough to be unorthodox, interesting enough to be unorthodox, and skilled enough to get away with it. And it seems that he's kind of simplified what he does now in a way that he's more predictable. He's almost, it's like the process Deontay Wilder went through with Malik Scott, where they took all the stuff that made them quite hard to deal with in the ring and got rid of it. And so now they're really easy to deal with in the ring. But the upside never came. Like, they weren't better offensively. So you've traded off your gifts for a bag of magic beans, basically. And these magic beans didn't even give you a beanstalk. And that's what I see with Caleb Plant. I see a guy who, however you slice and dice it, you're like, go back to what you know. This Breadman guy isn't the guy. I can't say he's not good enough, because I don't know. He's just not the right fit. Yeah, he's not the right fit. People say, look what he did with Julian J. Rock Williams. I'm like, well, look at what Charlo did with Julian J. Rock Williams. And there you go. So anyone listening to this that is boxing, be very careful. Don't change trainers. Don't have too many trainers. Don't have too many people telling you how to box. Yeah, trust one voice. Trust one voice and one vision, and commit to it fully. Plant didn't, and you can see that in his recent performances. In terms of Charlo, people will tell you that there was no sign of ring rust, but Thomas Lamana was there to make sure that no ring rust was presented. And you got to give the Americans credit, because I'll say this now. Thomas LaManna doesn't beat Zach Chelly in this country. For me, he's another Anthony Sims Jr. You know where they package him up right. You get Adam Smith to say the right things, and, the media will run around and say, you're this great boxer, you're this, you're that, and all of a sudden, this guy's a world beater, right? But they gave Jamal Charlo what I'd call a small hall fighter. Yeah, that's what he is. He's a Luke Blackledge. And I don't say that disrespectfully to Luke Blackledge, but Luke Blackledge is a small hall fighter. Is, always will be. And so Jamal Charlo looks good. Different hairstyle, different approach. Good to see him and his brother back together. But what Jamal Charlo will always bring is power. That's what he always, power. He never hits you clean, but you see the reaction to people getting hit by Charlo, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. No one makes him react like that before or after. There's something in the power that those Charlo brothers have when they get it right, that it looks nasty because people's legs start to shake. And so he basically beat up Thomas LaManna. Thomas LaManna tried his best, tough New Jersey sort of guy, did what he could, but got broken down and got stopped. Dr. Dean was not fit to continue. Probably wasn't fit to be in the ring with Jamal Charlo. But you need these sorts of fights to get the rust out. What you'd now do with Jamal Charlo is have him box again in August. Right, that's it. Have him box again in August, and then a more interesting fight towards the end of the year. Not hard. And if he does show that he's good enough, you start to line him up for Canelo and say, look, can the brother get revenge? Age-wise, I think it works a lot better. And we should actually touch on that because we're in a new era in boxing, aren't we? Where boxers in their mid-30s are a viable commercial option. This never used to be the case. So if you look at Eubank Sr., by the time he was 31, 32, he was massively on the downswing. And that's just how it was. Nigel Benn, 31, 32, massively on the downswing. I'd say the same with Roy Jones, although he managed to carry that on, but he wasn't the freak that he used to be once he got past 31, 32. And if you go back in time, you see it with a lot of these boxers. Everyone starts to decline at that 31, 32, and then they're managing their careers. And so the question becomes, and this is going to be relevant because I feel the same about Josh Taylor. Are we running our older boxers into the ground, and is that what's causing them to get old? And the reason I say that is I'll go back to about 7 years ago when I got to watch Derek Chisora training up close. And it was the oddest thing at the time because I was so used to regimented, structured training programs, right? That old boy would come in certain sessions, and it might not be a sparring session, it might just be a bag work session. He'd come in, he'd warm up, he'd wrap his hands, he'd do 4 rounds on the bag. And that was enough for him. And at that point, he was like, cool, I'm done, right? And that session, from when he walked in the door till he walked out the door, could have been 40, 45 minutes. Yeah? And that's including him getting in, getting ready, doing his work, and warming down and leaving. But I've also seen Dal Boy come in, warm up, spar 10 rounds, just spar everyone in the gym. That wasn't even what was planned for him on that day. He's like, no, I just want to spar today. Jump in, he'd get on his watt bike, put the seat into the things because he didn't like people riding the watt bike. He'd warm up, Don would wrap his hands up, and he'd just jump in. Anybody that was in the gym, come in, you come in, you come in. And it wasn't like he was taking the piss out of people. Like he wasn't just battering people. He boxed to everyone's level. And I remember him coming out the ring and saying, no one knows my body better than me. And he's like, when I feel good, I train very hard. He's like, when I don't feel good, I do enough that my body knows we trained. And maybe that's why Derek has longevity he does, because he's better at managing his body than anyone else. He might also just be genetically gifted. Sometimes I think with boxers, we give them programs in their 30s that we gave them in their 20s. And the body needs completely different things. And maybe that's what aged Josh Taylor. Maybe that's what aged British boxers. The fact that they kept doing donkey work when they didn't need to do donkey work. But this is it. British sporting culture is this. We build up a process and we stick to that process. All science, no art. And I think in other cultures, there's more of a feel. Like, start the session, and if you feel super energized and super focused, we'll run it for 2 hours. If you don't, we'll run it for 30 minutes. And there isn't enough of that in boxing, in my opinion. And I think that's what the greats probably got right. When the body felt really, really good, you did all the work you had to do. And then maybe front loaded some of next week's work into that session. And then you might be like, my head's not in it today. And then you'll do something else. But you know that you banked the effort when you needed to. And maybe that's what's happened with the Charlos. Like they haven't fought a lot. If you imagine in their 30s, those guys haven't fought a lot. So they haven't taken many shots. So they're still fresh, they're still strong, whereas guys that Plant have. And they're aging. If you look at Fury jumps in and out of retirement. So Fury doesn't really take a lot of punishment. Just trains when he wants to train, and then he'll lock in for camp. Whereas I look at Joshua, and Joshua's having to have surgery here, surgery there, needs recovery. Now his body's starting to betray him because he's doing the same workouts he did in his 20s. And this is what happens when trainers don't understand the full life cycle. And I guess this is why you need old timers in boxing, because the old timers will tell you you can't always go flat out. And we've built this culture because you've got young, insecure coaches in sport a lot of the time. They run you into the ground in your 20s, and then that's all they know now because that got them results. And so they'll run you into the ground in your 30s, and you're like, I can't do this anymore. And then you fall out with your coach, you go somewhere else. But the coach should actually be adapting and going, you don't need to. Think about football. Like Ledley King didn't really train. They just wheeled Ledley King out on a Saturday, and he had enough about him to play. Paul McGrath had enough about him to play. Did the same with guys like Roy Keane. Just start to manage that workload. You ain't got to train all the time. It happens a lot in rugby. Like the older guys don't train as much. They come in, they get enough physical and mental activation so that they are sharp and that they know what's going on, but they don't do the hard yards because they don't need to. The body knows how to do the hard yards. We need more of that in boxing, I think, of managing that load. Because once you get to 35, 36, you're not going to fight 23, 24-year-olds. It's unlikely. You're going to fight guys your age. Joshua's going to fight guys in their late 30s, right? So you don't need to be super fit, super energetic, because you're fighting old guys too. Manage your body, and you can have more and more of those fights. But back to the boxing. Look, where does it leave Plant versus Charlo? I don't know. I don't want to see that next because I don't know what Plant's got left. Like, you got to remember, Resendez is a guy that was getting stopped by 19-year-olds. And he was able to hurt Caleb Plant. So maybe the Canelo and Benavidez beatings took a bit more out of him than we thought. And if that's the case, then is it really a meaningful fight? Because, and let me be controversial here, Jamal Charlo might have the most destructive jab in boxing after Golovkin. Like, you remember when Golovkin would just smash people with his jab, like smash them to pieces. But Golovkin did it shooting in, like he'd bring all of his weight behind him with his jab. So if you watch Golovkin jab, both feet come with him. He doesn't just step forward with one foot, both feet come with him. So that whole mass shifts forward. Charlo gets the same effect without doing that. He jabs almost like he's left-handed. Like, it's a scary, scary jab. Do you know what I mean? And I thought Charlo had a good fight week. If you remember, he had the whole thing about, drugs in sport. I think Jaime Munguia popped for testosterone. And so they were asking Jamal Charlo, and he was saying, look, you got to look at these guys like Victor Conte and what they're doing over there. And it's the most intelligent thing. Actually, if it's not in the intro, then I should have used it in the intro. It's one of the most intelligent things I've heard a boxer say about doping, where he's looked into it and he's like, okay, this is the process. And so I think this was a good week for Jamal Charlo. And if you're a boxing fan, you want to see him back and in fine fettle, I think. And one of the things we need to get away from as boxing fans, guys, we need to move away from this. Always trying to match people so they get beat. Not so you're entertained, so they get beat, right? So kid does well. Oh, yeah, the kid's really good. He's really good. He's really good. Yeah, let him go and fight Canelo. And you're like, why? Well, why not? And I think there's a real thing in boxing of wanting to get people beat. And I don't understand why. Like, there's almost like this dislike or this, I don't even know what it is. That I don't like the idea that someone's undefeated. They did it with Mayweather for years. Like, right, set him up to get beat. And the reason people wanted Canelo to fight Golovkin is they thought Golovkin would beat Canelo up. And then when it turned out Canelo's got a Hall of Fame chin, as well as a Hall of Fame career, they're like, no, it's not going to happen here, is it? And so ever since, people have been trying to get Canelo beat. Like, they were happy when Bivol won. Oh my God, yeah, look. And it's the toxicity in the boxing fan base, isn't it? Like, I'm happy when people lose. It's like, why are you happy when someone loses? You don't have to deal with the aftermath of that. You know, we take more joy in defeat than we do in victory. And we do need to change that, because it's sad. Jamal Charlo is good for boxing. If he had a better lifestyle, I think he'd be in that discussion of best of his generation. I just do. I think he's got one of the best hands in boxing, got one of the nastiest uppercuts. Like, him and his brother, just nasty people in that ring. But it just seemed that Jamal Charlo had just more to him physically, while Jamel may have had more to him technically. But he could have been undisputed at 160. Like his brother was at 154. That could have happened. It's a shame that it didn't. But let's enjoy these guys while we have them. And hopefully the time away from the ring has kept him fresh, although lifestyle kind of suggests otherwise. But that's what I would say. But overall, I don't think that was a card to bring American boxing back, and I don't think that was a card to bring PBC back. Like, I think PBC, like a lot of promotions right now, just treading water. Like, we're in a period now where we have no idea what the boxing orthodoxy will be, but let's talk about that later. Just aware that I hadn't really touched on the Frank Warren card from Glasgow, had I? And here's something that people may know, but I don't know if they do. Josh Taylor fights Echo Essien, right? And like, to most people in British boxing, most people in British boxing, fans, etc., you're like, okay, this is Josh having a fight just to see where he's at 147. That was what this was. This is let's see where he's at, right? Like Caleb Plant versus Resendez. Let's just see where he's at. Shake off a few cobwebs. All right, you know, it'd be a tough fight, but Josh is Josh, right? That was the expectation. I haven't known a favorite in a fight be so roundly discounted as Josh Taylor was in the boxing world. Most people I spoke to who were involved directly in boxing thought Echo would win. I thought Echo Essien would win. Like, I was supremely confident Echo Essien would win. And that might be one of the most hurtful realizations I've had in boxing. Because that would mean at 34, Josh Taylor was done. And then you look at his record and you go, no, at 30, Josh Taylor was done. Because that's when he beat Ramirez. And he never got the momentum back after that. Remember, he never, at that time, when Josh Taylor beat Ramirez, the way he beat Ramirez, there were legit conversations. I'm sure Bob Arum was talking about making Josh Taylor versus Terence Crawford, you know. And then when Crawford was undisputed at 147, it was like, well, Taylor undisputed at 140. He's big. Crawford at 147, this is a fight that makes sense. It can be done in-house because it was a top-ranked fight. To go from that to where Josh Taylor is now, how? I thought it was interesting that when Taylor lost to Essien, the first thing Shane McGuigan posted was just a picture of him and his dad leaning over some ropes. And I thought, that's exactly it. There are some trainers that know how to get the best out of you. They just know. Yeah? They've studied things that other guys haven't studied. And because they got you early, they're not fans. I just think with Joe McAnally, he's a fan. He's like, wow, I've got Josh Taylor. And he's thinking about what it's going to do for his career. And Joe McAnally is not wrong. You know, in this situation, you can't really blame Joe McAnally. Because he's been given Josh Taylor and said, do something with him. Now, if you're Joe McAnally, is there an opportunity to speak to Shane? I don't think there is. I think the McGuigans are like, we don't care about Josh Taylor. We're not helping him. So he's got to figure Josh Taylor out on his own. Whereas I think the McGuigans knew, because I knew, like, if you look at Josh, like if you ever meet Josh in person, He's really long and thin. So when people say Josh Taylor's a big whatever, he's really long and he's really thin. And he doesn't go a long way from front to back. He just doesn't. And he's not particularly physically dense either. Now, if you've ever met Echo Essien, in contrast, Essien isn't big. Like, height-wise, width-wise, depth-wise, he's not huge. But it's granite. Whatever he has is granite. Like, there's no give in him. Whereas there's a fair bit of give in Josh, and you saw that in the fight. So Josh basically has 12 rounds of hitting a brick wall. A brick wall that punches back for 12 rounds. And I can't remember who I messaged, and I said, if Taylor can't get it done in the first 5 or 6 rounds, Essien wins. And Josh couldn't get it done in the first 4 or 5 rounds because Essien's that tough. Frank Warren said it best. There are certain guys that would have folded under the Josh Taylor onslaught. In fact, there are many guys who did fall under that onslaught. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what we used to love about Josh, those first 5 or 6 rounds where he just take it to you. But what's happened over time is he hasn't been able to sustain that. And so you got to look back and go, what were the McGuigans doing that no one else is doing? Because I look at Josh and I go, but you've got the talent, you've got the nastiness. Where's it all gone wrong? Because Josh Taylor would have splattered Jack Cattrall at any other point in his career prior to 2021. Would have splattered him. And something went. And maybe one day we'll find out. But something went inside of Josh Taylor, and he's never been able to get it back. Because he's not at an age where we should be talking about him having had his best days. We shouldn't be. I don't know if it's a lack of activity. I don't know if it's the wrong training. No idea, but there's something off with Josh Taylor that someone's got to figure out. Because there's still a decent fighter in there somewhere. Just don't know where it's gone. In terms of Echo Essien, Jesus Christ, if you followed me long enough, you'll know I've been banging the drum for him to get a promotional push for a long time. Because he's hard to beat. Like, take the Harry Scarf defeat away for no other reason than those two knew each other and maybe Echo took him lightly. And that always happens between sparring partners. One person cares about the other more. So Harry Scarf would have been watching Echo more than Echo was watching Harry Scarf. And that can happen sometimes. Now, in the broader scheme of things, you'd get Echo Essien a world title shot now. Like, I think he deserves it. He's done everything that's asked of him, and he's like Nottingham's Denzel Bentley. Whenever Franks needed a performance, whenever Franks needed something to go, wow, what a night, Denzel's delivered, Echo's delivered. Yeah, and credit to him, like, because he was a GB and he was good. He was kind of in the same camp as Chris Congo, where they were good. And you can see there'd be coaches' dreams, like never coming out of shape, do everything the coach asks of them. But they'd go to tournaments and like it would just be 50-50, win one, lose one, win one, lose one. And so GB were like, not quite the performances we need, which is a shame because both were really good boxers. And so he's always been in that kind of conversation without ever getting the credit. If Echo Essien was from London, it would be completely different because people would get behind him. Something about Nottingham means people tend to disappear. Nottingham and Leicester, where people tend to disappear because it's not considered a massive boxing market, which is odd because if you consider how talented the kids are that come out of that kind of M1 corridor, you'd look at it differently. But I don't know. For Echo, I think world title shot has to happen. I can't see his window extending too much into the future. So make that happen. I think for Josh Taylor, honestly, as fans, we should allow Josh to just have a few fights where he's just finding himself. I don't think there should be anything wrong with that. Let him find himself, let him work out what's best for him, and just see if there's anything left. I think if you're a true fan of the sport, that's what you'll really want. Because I'm like, man, the decline shouldn't be this steep and shouldn't be this rapid, you know? And maybe I'm a bit biased because I don't have a problem with Josh. I know people talk about, you know, the tweets and stuff, but he's just a guy that wants to do well in boxing. Let's jump into the rest of the card. Moses Atama, Mike Balogun. Moses dropped him for fun. That final time he drops him, big right hook while going backwards. I don't think people realize how hard that is. Like the degree of balance and coordination you need to pull that off without tripping over. That's impressive. But to then turn it into a knockout shot off a right hook, that's crazy. And I've said this about Moses, I'll keep saying it. As long as he's got that spring in his step, he's a menace to everybody. Like, you almost want him to have all of his hard fights now, when his body's bouncy enough to take the rigors of these. Because you don't want to be 27, 28, and then people are saying, where's that bounce and skill that he used to have? Because he will slow down. He will become, I don't want to say plodding, but his feet won't bounce the same way. It just happens. Now, I think I said this before. You can't explain why it happens. It just happens. You're not as springy. Think about all your sporting life, right? And this is for everyone listening. When you're a teenager, you could just show up and do stuff. Run fast, kick the ball hard, stamina for days. And then you got to your late 20s and you're like, oh, it's a bit harder. And you realize you didn't have that same spring. It was taking you 2 extra steps to get to top speed. All these things happen because your body just gets old and stuff gets in. Your tendons get a little bit thicker. Maybe there's a pinch point in the joint, whatever. You just can't do it. The body's not fresh. And so Moses Atama's got to maximize the freshness of his body while he can. And then when it's time to, make the real money and he's slowed down a bit, at least then he's got the choice of opponents. And that's where you want to get to. But I thought he was impressive. Happy for Nathaniel Collins. You know me, I don't delve too deep into the small man world, but happy for him. I thought, Lee McGregor did his best, but he's also seen better days. It's funny what happens when you leave the McGuigans, isn't it? And I don't know why that is. No one's ever asked Shane, why is it that people leave? What is it you guys do in the gym that means that these guys fall off a cliff when they leave? But if you ever want an advert for not leaving Shane McGuigan, if you started with him, it's that. Everyone that leaves falls off a cliff. So yeah, I was like, wow. What's going on here? Quick one I want to talk about is the Luke McCormack stoppage win. Can't remember who he fought. Fought a guy called Cuentes, right? Sammy Cuentes. And if you remember, he dropped Sammy Cuentes, and Cuentes is lying on the canvas, right? He flat on his back, starfish. He's laid out, but it looks like he's chilling, right? And the ref's counting and he's looking up. You can see that he's concentrating on the ref. And the ref gets like 7. He gets up and he goes, yeah, I'm good. And the ref's like, no, I'm going to stop it. So I think the ref started counting, saw that the guy wasn't responding, and then just wrapped up the fight. Was like, nah, it's done. And then the guy's like, yeah, but you were counting. I could have got up at any point up to 10. And then so they have this huge back and forth. Now, I don't think he would have won the fight for a second, but it's a reminder, don't mess about with the count. And if you are perfectly okay, you got to communicate that to the referee. Just say to the ref, I'm cool. I'm just chilling. I'll be up in a sec. That's what you got to do. I've seen guys do that, where they're like, I'm all right. Yeah, they told the ref, I'm okay. I'll be up in a sec. And the referee keeps counting. And then he gets up and it's like, you okay? Yeah, fine. I just needed a break. It's okay, cool. Carry on. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. What else happened on that card that people want to talk about? One of personal pride for me is there's a young kid called Reece Lynch, a Scottish kid, just turned over. Won his fight by stoppage. Can't remember who he fought. But nasty puncher. Big kid for the weight as well. Fighting at 140, I think. But I love the fact that he's represented by Dave McGinley. And if you follow my podcast journey, you'll know Dave's one of the OGs of new age and what I do now. And I'm happy to see that he's taking those steps, because I remember when he was like looking to get into law, and I didn't know he's going to get into sports law, and now he's managing boxers. And he's now realizing all the stuff we said in the pod is true. Like, boxing is like Caesar's Rome. Like, it is so political. A lot of what you do in this game is performative. It's to show the big hitters that you're willing to do whatever they ask you to do. It is. Look, you know what I mean? It's like, when a dog lies down, it exposes its belly. That's essentially what boxing is. And as I said to him, if you don't control the raw materials, i.e. you train really good fighters that people want to sign and work with, etc. If you don't control the distribution, which is TV, broadcast, etc. If you don't control the money, boxing is really hard for you. But if you control access to those 3 pillars of boxing, it's easier. It's one of the reasons I run my mouth the way I do, because I know that if you give me a 5-year run, I'll produce guys that will win British titles. I can do that. That's not hard. Well, it is hard, not hard for me. And so that's why I have the conversations that I do, because you can't exclude me from the boxing ecosystem, because you're almost just cutting your head off to spite your face. But he's now realizing it's not so easy to get things done, because the things you want are wanted by everybody else. So it's like, why should I deal with you? But I am so happy for him. I'm happy that he's in the game. I'm happy that he's working with really good talent as well. And, we put that in the box of podcast legacy. Alex Arthur's son, Alex Arthur Jr., has finally made his debut. Boxer, good friend of mine, Robbie Chapman. Feedback from Robbie was positive. So Robbie's like, yeah. Just an upside to the kid. Let's see what he does in his next few fights. Because Robbie was like, I was going to get made an example of on his debut. No chance. So Robbie was just like, yeah, there's something there. We just got to see how he progresses. So that's good. Alois Jr., how many years have I talked about this kid? You saw what you saw with him. Handled David Jameson with ease, which isn't an easy thing to do, by the way. Here's what I will say. Don't be surprised if he goes up to heavyweight. Now, honestly, do not be surprised if he goes up to heavyweight. Now, I don't know when he's going to do that. I think win some titles at cruiser first. But because of his age, there aren't many guys. Like, once he's fought Vidal Riley, there aren't many people to be fighting at cruiserweight. So for him hanging around there doesn't make a lot of sense. If he can get a quick world title, absolutely. And I wish him all the best. But he's always wanted to box at heavyweight. And I think he will box at heavyweight. Like, because he hasn't finished growing. He hasn't hardened up yet. I can see him walking comfortably at 102, 103 kilograms. And that'll be the perfect weight for him, where he can just go and do a lot of damage. I'm more excited by that journey than what he's doing at cruiserweight, just because most of the names at cruiser have gone now. But I would like to see that run. Give him the run now of your Jack Masseys, your Billum Smiths, your Vidal Rileys, Chamber. Just let him have a 4 or 5 fight run at domestic level. And then when he's done that, if he can get a world title out of it, shoot up to heavy. I think he's going to cause problems for everyone at heavyweight. Because I don't think you've seen the best of him. He wants to be a heavyweight. That's going to bring the best out of him. And also the fact that he's come up the weights. I keep saying this. Guys who come up the weights are just generally better boxers. Higher work rates, more accurate punches. It will suit him. He'll see all the shots coming. His reflexes will be on point. He'll be ready. I think another 2-3 years at cruiser and you just bump him up to heavyweight and he'll be an absolute menace. But proud of him. Like, as I said, like, I saw this kid at 15 years old just lighting into anyone that jumped in the ring, didn't care. And then he'd smile and shake your hand afterwards. No. He's a good kid. Yeah, super proud of him. So here's the point in the pod where I'm just going to freestyle a bit and just touch on some stuff that's happened in the last few days. So if you remember when Fisher lost to Dave Allen, I asked a lot of questions about Mark Tibbs. And it stirred a lot of reaction and response. It stirred up a lot of strong feelings. And I was like, because it wasn't even anything I said with any great spite. It was just me saying, hold on. As someone that has to offer an opinion on a sport, otherwise the podcast doesn't work, here's me offering my opinion. And my opinion was simple. We need to ask him the same questions we ask everybody else. And if we do that, it's harder to justify his reputation. And people thought that was an attack on Mark Tibbs, and it wasn't. Mark is literally just the canary in the mine. Because there are loads of other people like that. Right? My thing with Mark isn't about Mark Tibbs as a man, not about Mark Tibbs as a son, as a father, as a brother, nothing. I don't know Mark Tibbs in those contexts. I just don't. I know Mark Tibbs as a trainer in boxing. That's all I know him as. That's all I'm qualified to speak about. So whatever Mark does, whether Mark likes to play golf, play cricket, I don't know anything else. It's just this. And in this space, I feel qualified to speak. And so it's not a personal attack. It's just saying he's been given many chances with many talented fighters to do something. And it's never gone well. At some point, we have to ask why. And people say, well, okay, but what makes you qualified? So I'm not qualified. I'm just saying. Joe Gallagher's had to go through the fire. Because at various points, we've all questioned Joe. But Joe's come back and Joe's evolved and Joe's shown that he can do it. Adam Booth has faced the same questions. You know what I mean? And he has, like, you know, how are you still breaking fighters after all these years? Tunde Ajayi's faced these questions. Don Charles has faced these questions. Dave Caldwell's faced these questions. Shane McGuigan's faced these questions, particularly early in his career, when people are like, who does he think he is? What, you just want to get into boxing because you're Barry McGuigan's son? Well, I was like, hold on. Are we just acting like sons don't follow their fathers into boxing all of a sudden? Everyone forgot that there was a guy called Mark Tibbs who was around, and they weren't looking at him the same way. But people didn't like Shane McGuigan because he had different views. And that's what this boils down to. Boxing is an old boys club. If the right person says you're all right, you're all right. If Ed Muscat says Terry's cool, people just believe that. They'll just run with it. They'll never have met me, but because Ed Muscat said it, it's cool. If Martin Bauer says he's cool, it's cool. And you'll remember when I asked the questions of the Peacock, and I was called a hater. And I was like, no, I'm not a hater. I just asked questions. And I asked questions that I would ask of any supposed high-performance environment. If you are a high-performance environment, where is the high performance? If we can't see the high performance, are you a high-performance environment? The answer has to be no. But that's not the end of the story. How can you be a high-performance environment? Let's have that conversation. That was where my whole Peacock thing was headed. Even with Mark Tibbs, if people say you're just hating, no. If Mark Tibbs wants to have a high-performance environment, then he has to find ways to make it high performance. And we will judge it as high performance when we see high performance. That's all I am saying. And when you widen it out, I get a hard time for some of the stuff I say on this podcast, right? Because I speak truth to the masses. 9 years ago, when I first started doing this, my goal was keep the fans informed. Not of everything, because there's some things the fans don't need to know. And it's actually counterproductive for them to know some things. But let's just make sure they're not being lied to. Let's make sure they're not being hoodwinked. That was my goal. It's never changed. And the reason I hold trainers in high regard and therefore high accountability is this. You will never understand the responsibility that a trainer has over a fighter. It doesn't start and stop in the gym. It's a life thing. They got problems in their life, they're going to call you. They need help with something, they're going to call you. It's a weird thing. You're not quite their boss. You're not quite their mate. You're not quite their parent. But it's almost like you're 85% of each. So not enough to call you that thing, but enough that you carry a lot of that load. And that means we have to be whiter than white. We have to aspire to be better. We have to want to be the best we can be so they can be the best they can be. And that means not doing shady stuff behind the scenes. No one talks about Team GB where young women were pressured into almost starving themselves to make weight. I know in boxing we talk about, it's a weight making sport, you got to sacrifice. But when there were just 3 weight classes, the pressure that women were under to make certain weights, heartbreaking. And we know that women are generally more prone to eating disorders than men. Right? But this never got talked about. The lack of aftercare. So when women left because they couldn't hack it, the lack of aftercare. When women were leaving the system because they were being sexually harassed by male and female coaches. Doesn't get talked about. When people were excluded from GB, not because they weren't talented enough, they didn't want the issues that come with dealing with travelers. Doesn't get talked about. So you've got all of these media outlets running around with microphones and cameras and blogs and this and that. No one's asking these questions. No one's going to these female fighters and saying, what happened in GB? What's happening in camp that's upsetting you? Who's sliding in your DMs and saying, I can do an interview for you if you join me for dinner? Who are these people? Who are the managers and who are the promoters who are sleeping with female fighters and saying, I can do this for you if you look after me? If you're the media, do your job. Do your job. And this isn't new stuff. This has been going on for 15 years. Do your job. So when you see me come on here and ask these questions, I shouldn't be the only one. There's a lot of dirt that happens in the sport. I am telling you this now. There is a lot of dirt that happens in the sport where many vulnerable people, and I've just talked about the higher echelons, but we're not even talking about the regular stuff. Inappropriate behavior between coaches and fighters in gyms across this country. We ain't talking about that. So sometimes I come on here and I am frustrated and I will let things out and I'll say, why are these guys getting a hard time and these guys aren't? Because my inbox is full of the injustices that happen in boxing, and it's not fair to out people that haven't already been outed. Now, when it's in the public domain, we can talk about stuff, but stuff never gets talked about. But boxing is a cesspool, and you get away with a lot if your name and your face fit. If they don't, the stuff will leak out about you all the time. You notice that there's no dirt on Tunde Ajayi. None. And you know people would leak that if they could. That should let you know the level of integrity Tunde Ajayi has. The fact that no dirt has come out. I'll tell you guys now for absolute certain, I have no issues opening up my social media inboxes. Anything boxing related, I have no issue opening up and saying, you can have a look. There's no dirt, no scandal in mine. Because I take the sport seriously. I take the sport seriously because as a grassroots coach, I know what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with kids from broken homes. I'm dealing with kids in messed up situations. I'm dealing with adults who are battling being in a city on their own and going, I've got no friends apart from the people in this gym. How can I do that? I'm dealing with adults who are saying, I'm struggling at work. Can you help me? I am dealing with people who come to me in their moments where they're most vulnerable. And in that moment, they should be able to trust me and say, T, you're the only guy I can come to because I know you ain't going to try and shaft me. In my most vulnerable moment, you're not going to try and put your hand down my shorts or down my top. You're not going to do that. And that's the standard you've got to hold yourself to. And there are a lot of people in the sport that don't. So when you hear me talk, I talk because I want this sport to be as pure as possible. Because we draw people in from some of the most damaged backgrounds you can think of. And if this sport isn't a safe haven for them, then we failed. That's the big picture. The smaller picture is professional boxers have one career. Trainers have 100 lives. You shouldn't be screwing a guy over for your own ends, for your own ego. You need to do what's best for this motherfucker's career. That's why I asked the questions I did. Who thought it would be a good idea for Johnny Fisher to rematch Dave Allen? Come out and say it. Then come out and say what changes you made for Johnny Fisher because he came out worse. That's all I am saying. I don't know what you're like as a person. I'd ask the same of any trainer that produced that. We used to say the same about Dave Allen. What's going on with Dave? We asked about Travis and Jamie Moore. What are they doing over there? Why is Chantal Cameron leaving? We ask all of these questions. This time we ask questions like, how is Chantal Cameron fighting in New York on the same card as Ellie Scotney when Shane McGuigan's there? I thought this was a problem. I thought this was a problem. These are questions people should be asking. Keep the sport above board, keep the sport clean. That's all I'm saying. Because we're in a really strange place in terms of boxing, aren't we? We're in a really messed up place where we don't know what's real anymore. And now people expect me to give Misfits a kicking, but deep down I quite like Misfits. I like the fact that people decided to make something that exists independently of boxing and has forced people in boxing to go cap in hand and say, can we come on your platform, please? And they go, we'll see about it. I love that, by the way. That's the punk spirit I really like. KSA and Mams and all those guys, they credit to them. They nailed that. I have no issue with that. That's a separate lane. I'm about what's happening in the sport where you are either governed by England Boxing or the British Board. That is a mess right now. We got no one doing home shows. Everyone doing box cups, and so where's the money going? Listen, where's the money going? I got kids now who like, yo, you fighting? No, I'm waiting for the Haringey. What do you mean you're waiting for the Haringey? Yeah, I've been waiting for the Haringey since the Nationals ended. What? No wonder people don't want to do amateur boxing anymore, because everyone's treating it like they've got this secret formula for success. There's only one formula. You fight as often as you can and get better. All these box cup, Capital Box Cup, Manchester Box Cup, I don't know, Ed Begley Box Cup, Celtic Box Cup, Riviera Box Cup, Box Cup in the Hills, Box Cup in the Dales, Box Cup by the beach, Box Cup on the Channel. I don't know, all these things. What clubs get money from them? All these fighters, what clubs are getting the money? Because no one goes to watch, by the way. Yeah, okay, they tell you there are 400 people here. Okay, cool. But all of them are wearing lanyards. There are no fans there, apart from a few parents, etc. So where's the money for the clubs? When the clubs do a home show, it is for the community. It goes in the local paper. People come and watch because they know the kids, school friends, parents, uncles, cousins. People come and they pay their 10, 15, 20 quid to support the local club. Whether you're Holmes Chapel up north, whether you're Rumbles in Sittingbourne, whether you're Empire in Easton, in Bristol. It doesn't matter. Whether you're King's Gym in Sheffield with Chris Smedley, it doesn't matter. Bermentov, Bertley, it doesn't matter. When you do a home show, your community comes out and it says, we are here to support our youngsters. The money stays in the club. I don't know who makes money off the box cups. And I'm not saying that people are pocketing a profit, by the way. I'm not. What I am saying is it's not being split across all the clubs that participate. They're paying to play. So now everyone's waiting for box cups. The home shows aren't happening. The community engagement's not happening. So the young kids aren't at the show messing about with their mates, falling in love with the sport, because they're not wanting to travel. Do you mean they're not wanting to travel from Redditch all the way to Manchester? It's, do you know what I mean? You're just not going to do that. And then people are telling me, yeah, but the Manchester Box Cups on Sky, it looked terrible. Like there was no thought to production values. And if I'm being honest, it was just a Fury showcase. It wasn't really about anything else. Having these things on bank holidays as well, when trainers and coaches just want time to spend with their family, I think is kind of disrespectful. Manchester Box Cup, Capital Cup. I don't care which one it is. I think it's disrespectful that there's one long weekend where as boxers we can just go, if boxers and coaches, sorry, we can just go, right, I've got this weekend with my family. Watch the last day of the Premier League season, watch it with my family, spend some time with my mates, have a few drinks, forget about boxing. And someone selfishly goes, yeah, we'll just do a box cup in the bank holiday. That way we can go all the way through till Monday. Who cares? Like, I don't want to enter any of my fights. Anything that happens on a bank holiday, anything that happens on like Easter, whatever, I will never enter fighters. If people want to enter them on outside of my approval, whatever, cool. You won't see me there. Because no one looks after the health of the trainers. I hate seeing old dudes just shuffling around. And I know that his arms, his shoulders, his fingers are fucked from years of training kids. But he does it because he doesn't know who he is without it. And you watch them and you're like, I don't want to be him. I don't want to be him. This is why it's a mess right now. Everyone's trying to secure the bag. I'm seeing mad kind of semi-white collar shows with washed up amateurs jumping back in the ring. And oh yeah, so good to be back in the ring, man. You know, these idiots that were allowed in by people who should have known better. And they allowed the value of boxing to be watered down so that you can be a charity worker walking around telling people, yeah, I'm a serious boxer, when you're not. And every time we've seen you in with a serious boxer, it looks like you've never boxed. We can't have this anymore. It's not right. We've allowed every, search engine optimization expert, every creative, every media planner to tell you they're a boxer because they fought some other fat dude from the other company in front of loads of rich people. And now, oh yeah, I'm a boxer. Yeah, I know exactly all about it. I can talk about Anthony Joshua now. And they start puffing their chests out. But when they jump in the gym with some angry kids from Streatham and they get hit with a right hand and their legs buckle and they start crying, you don't see that bit, do you? But this is all allowed because it's about securing the bag. Amateur gyms have become whores to money. There's amateur gyms, and then there's this weird mix of kind of like rich people's gyms. Like, oh, we're just going to charge people 100 quid a month to be trained by someone they could have trained at Fitness First with for 40 quid. For the number of gyms that are in London, there aren't enough good coaches. Make of that what you will. That's the mess we're in, guys. So to bring it back to what I was saying, so when I talk about guys like Mark Tibbs, what I'm saying to you guys is there are loads of problems in this sport. And when you see me asking these questions, you will do well to also ask these questions and say, what is going on? That's it. Just ask what is going on. Because we're now at a point. Think about where boxing is right now. If Turkey says, I want to do a 10-fight card, that 10-fight card will happen. So who's it promoted by? The Ring? Probably. So what happened to the global promoter, Eddie Hearn? What happened to the Hall of Fame promoter, Frank Warren? Are they not promoting anymore? Or are they now outsourced? We don't even control British boxing anymore. So if you think what I just said there's a rant, okay, cool, it's a rant, but that's the point. We don't control British boxing anymore. It is out of control at the pro level and the amateur level because everyone's chasing that bag. Turkey's shown that he doesn't need promoters. He'll say, look, I'll take all of these guys under my own deals. Turkey said, I want a 2-fight deal with Joshua. Hearn's like, okay. No resistance. No, I want to do my own shows with Anthony Joshua. No. Okay, Turkey, you can have him. If Turkey says he wants Moses Atama, Frank will provide him. We don't control British boxing anymore. This is why you ask questions. Who's really controlling British boxing right now? I'm going to leave it on that question.